Now, go with me to the present. And I want to read to you from some newspapers, okay? Let's get out of the scriptures for a second and get into the newspapers, okay? Listen to this, because they're talking about, where we are in the world. And for over 50 years, during what we now call the Cold War, neither of the superpowers ever thought that a nuclear exchange was winnable. We had the idea that it would be mutual annihilation, so why even do it? I mean, let's just go on angry and threatening and not do it. And so that was kind of like the Cold War stalemate, that we wouldn't want to mutually assure the destruction of the planet. So that's why we got comfortable. We decided that we would never do that, us and the Soviets. And so we were just going to live and rattle our sabers and fly our bombers and go to code whatever, but we were never going to do that because it would just destroy. They knew that unleashing the fires of hell, as they were thought, those weapons, would poison and destroy life for everyone on the planet. History has even recorded that scientists who developed the Soviet weapons of mass destruction were willing to go into permanent exile in Siberia rather than to develop any further variations. I mean, that's history. In fact, I want to read to you, General Ion Pacepa is his name. He defected from the Soviet bloc, and now all these guys are making a fortune writing books. I want to read to you, this was just last October in the Washington Times. I'm going to read 2 paragraphs of his book. Okay, this is a general that was in the Air Force and was over in intelligence and with all the atomic stuff. This is what he says in his book. It's worth remembering that Andrei Sakharov, the father of the Soviet hydrogen bomb, chose to live in a Soviet gulag instead of continuing to develop the power of death. This guy went to Siberia. He said, I will not tie my hands. I will not work anymore. I will not help you. He says, you've got enough. It's too bad. Sakharov wrote this in 1968. I wanted to alert the world to the grave perils, the threatening of the human race that thermonuclear extinction and ecological catastrophe and famine would bring because of the after effects of thermonuclear weapons. This writer goes on, this General Pacepa, he said even Igor Kurchatov, the KGB academician, who expressed this deep qualm in his conscience about helping create. He was, by the way, he was a KGB guy from 1943 when the Soviets first started understanding this and got the technology started until 1960. This guy ran the program from 1943 to 1960, this Igor fella. And this is what he wrote in 1960 at his death. He said this, the rate of growth of atomic explosive, this is in 1960. We heard in the testimony tonight that our testifier wasn't even alive then. So, I mean, this is a long time ago, okay? 1960, this is what he said. The rate of growth of atomic explosives is such that in just a few years, the stockpile will be large enough to create conditions under which the existence of life will be impossible. And that's why this guy wouldn't help anymore either in 1960. Sakharov quit, went to a gulag. This Pacepa guy said, I can't help you anymore. It's too dangerous. This is 1960 and 1968. That was a warning way back then. How is it today? We're all disarmed, right? We're paying the Soviets to get rid of those missiles, aren't we? Uh-huh. Are they getting rid of them? No. They've just developed far more powerful, far more deadly, far more lethal, far more mobile, far more accurate, far more long-lived armaments. Today, the Russian military has more weapons that are more powerful, more deployable, and more indefensible than at any time in the past. They have mobile ones now. They have huge mobile ones. They have them on rail cars. They have them on trucks. We never know where they are. You can't track all those trucks all the time because they have decoy trucks and they have tunnels they run them through miles long with multiple exits, and they can be under these hardened tunnels and then pop out at any time and just crank those things up and shoot them off with multiple independent re-entry warheads targeted today. Amazing. So that's Russia. Today, China is busily building atomic weapons. Already they have them armed and they can launch missiles that can strike here in the U.S., China. So Russia can hit us, China can hit us, much worse than 1960 and 1968. Today, the cruel and murderous regime of North Korea. Remember the regime that has starved its own people? There are over 1 million people in starvation in Korea because they're using all their resources on their atomic reactors that are for peacetime electrical production. But they're starving the people to make those work. And today, this cruel and murderous and irresponsible regime in North Korea has both nuclear warheads and missiles that could strike the U.S. and Europe. I mean, it used to just be Russia versus the U.S. Today, the generations of hatred and hostility that smolder between Pakistan and India have come to the frightening climax. If you read the newspaper, both sides now have atomic-tipped missiles pointing at each other. And both have publicly stated that an atomic weapon attack on the enemy is a winnable option as far as the Pakistanis and the Indians are concerned. They said in India, we got 1.2 billion people, what's a few, million gone? I mean, they didn't say it that crassly, but that's what they mean. Pakistan's the same. They actually have a scenario that they think it's winnable to launch missiles at each other, atomic weapons. In months, if not weeks, the bitterest enemy of the nation of Israel, the home of the Dark Prince of Persia, Iran itself, will have a growing arsenal of thermonuclear death and destruction in place. They already have the missiles. And the Israelis, with all their satellites, have confirmed that these missiles have a range that can strike with atomic weapons any part, not only of Israel, but of all of the Gulf area and even into Europe, the Iranians. And the Iranian version of Islam considers, quote, martyrdom for the cause of Allah to be the ultimate act of faith. Now, to be involved in a nuclear exchange that ensures a mutual destruction is an acceptable option to the mad mullahs of Tehran. If Iran gets nuclear weapons, you can be sure they will eagerly share them with the other fanatical Muslim nations. I mean, that's just a given. And with nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, it's possible to wipe out all flesh on earth. What happens? Let's go to Zechariah 14, okay? Let me read to you an on-the-site report of a nuclear exchange, okay? I think that's what Zechariah was seeing in Zechariah 14. Remember where that is? You go to Matthew and back up to Malachi and go back to Zechariah. It's just before the New Testament. Because the prophet who wrote his book of prophecies as he looked over the burned out rubble of Nebuchadnezzar's destruction of Jerusalem 2,500 years ago, that prophet, Zechariah, said this, and this is a precise medical description of what happens to people who are in the battlefield or in the city that are within the radius of the blast and effects of an atomic device. This is what it says in 14:1. And this shall be the plague which the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets. Their tongues shall dissolve in their mouths. And I want to read you a little article from Caltech here before we go, just for good sleeping. Okay, this will help you. This is some, tonight. This will help you go to sleep. Atomic weapons melt or dissolve their victims, just as Zechariah predicted 2,500 years ago. Now, this is from a Caltech chat site, or a blog site. It's widely believed and discussed at Caltech, California Institute of Technology, that Israel has developed an even more lethal version of atomic weaponry. They have taken the technology, since the Jewish atomic scientists are the one that thought of this, as in Einstein and others, all these brilliant Jews. They have perfected far beyond the American neutron bomb because they don't have much space. And this is what Caltech says. By the way, the neutron bomb is in terms of destroying human beings, is the ultimate weapon. And I'll quote it here. The enhanced neutron weapon that Israel seems to have absolutely demolishes all protein-bearing living things in a predetermined area from 1 to 100 square miles without destroying buildings and terrain. Amazing. Don't hurt the buildings. Just kill the people. Amazing where we've come to. And this is exactly, look back at chapter 12 of Zechariah, because this is fitting into a very familiar scenario that the Bible has portrayed for a long time. And that is that Israel is going to be pinned to the wall, and they are going to unleash what they've already declared, which is called their Samson option. Remember, Samson brought the temple down on himself of Dagon. Rather than survive, he killed himself with his enemies. And that is the proclaimed doctrine of the Israeli military. They will not again lose and be destroyed. So they'll go down with the building. Zechariah 12, verses 2 and 3. When the final siege of Jerusalem happens, the outcome will not be what the nations of the earth had planned. God says the destroyers of His people will be destroyed. Verse 2, behold, I'll make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples, when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. Verse 3, when it happens in that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all people. Here it is. All who would heave it away will be cut in pieces, though all nations of the earth are gathered against it. It's very possible that this describes the unleashing of the destructive power that Zechariah saw in chapter 14. The melting armies advancing on Jerusalem, the final siege. Well, what are we to make of this? We're not even going to be here. We're going to be with the Lord. Well, let me conclude with this, and this is where we'll pick up, Lord willing, next week. The Hebrew Bible has 4 different words for hope. Clinging hope, waiting hope, establishing hope, and sheltering hope. Just 4 different Hebrew words. They're the most graphic words. Paul says the God of hope, and we're saved in hope. Did you know the Hebrew Scriptures describe what we are supposed to be living as we see the world marshaled against God's people, as we see the events lining up for the end? What are we supposed to be doing? Getting afraid? Building bomb shelters? Getting gold for when money gets worthless? Well, do whatever is necessary. But you know what? We are supposed to be captured, captivated, surrounded, overflowing with this hope. This hopeless world we live in is supposed to see hope-filled believers. And that's where we'll pick up next time and actually see what we're supposed to do while the world is preparing for the worst time ever. Let's bow together. Father in heaven, I thank you that we were saved in hope, and that we can have hope as an anchor of our souls. And that's why we meet to study your word, to see what the end looks like, so we can share it with others and say we have hope in this hopeless time. And that's why we send our teams forth. And that's why we train evangelists. And that's why we pass out tracts, because we believe in you, the God of hope, who have anchored our souls in heaven. And we will not be lost. And we will not perish one day early or linger one day too long. May we live, may we serve, may we go in hope. In the precious name of Jesus, we thank you. Amen.